What happens when the man you've called Baba your entire life turns out to be a stranger written into your birth certificate by love alone, and not by blood? That is the question sitting at the center of KwaBaba episode 49, and by the time the credits roll, it is clear that nothing in this family will ever look the same again. Today we are unpacking every major moment from this episode, the confrontations, the boardroom battles, the quiet tears nobody was supposed to see, and the one revelation that is about to reshape the entire season. So settle in, because this is a big one. The episode opens not with noise, but with silence, the kind of silence that only exists in a house where everyone is pretending not to notice the tension in the air. The Makona family kitchen, usually loud with the sound of spoons against pots and children arguing over homework, is unusually still. Gogo Nomsa sits at the head of the table, stirring a cup of tea she has no intention of drinking, while her daughter-in-law, Linda, keeps glancing toward the hallway as if she's expecting someone to walk in with bad news. That feeling of dread is deliberate. The director wants us uneasy before a single word of dialogue is spoken, and it works. We quickly learn that the family has gathered because of a letter, a plain white envelope that arrived 3 days earlier from a private clinic in Pretoria, addressed to Thabo Makona, the family's eldest son and the man everyone assumes will inherit control of Makona Freight Solutions, the logistics company their late father built from a single delivery van into a multi-million rand operation. Thabo hasn't opened it yet. He's been carrying it in his jacket pocket for days, and the way he touches it every few minutes tells us he already suspects what's inside. Meanwhile, across town, we cut to Zenil, Thabo's younger sister, meeting with a lawyer about the company's shareholder agreement. This is where the business plotline of episode 49 really begins to take shape. Zenil has discovered a clause buried in their father's original founding documents that suggests ownership of Makona Freight Solutions was never meant to pass down purely by bloodline, but by demonstrated stewardship, a phrase so vague that it could mean almost anything, and that ambiguity is exactly what's about to tear the family apart. The lawyer, a sharp and unreadable woman named Advocate Lamini, warns Zenil that if this clause is contested in court, it could take years to resolve, and the company could bleed money the entire time. Zenil's response is telling. She says she doesn't care how long it takes, because she refuses to watch the company her father built get handed to someone who never truly earned it. We don't yet know who she means by that, but the accusation hangs heavy over the rest of the episode. Back at the family home, Thabo finally opens the envelope in front of his wife, Linda, and his uncle, Bab Vusi. His hands are shaking. Bab Vusi, ever the peacemaker, tries to lighten the mood by joking that it's probably just a routine health screening from his work medical aid. But the moment Thabo unfolds the paper and reads the first line, his face changes completely. He doesn't say anything. He simply hands the letter to Linda and walks out of the room. This is one of the most powerful nonverbal moments in the episode. No dramatic music, no raised voices, just a man quietly absorbing information that will change the rest of his life. Linda reads it, and her hand goes to her mouth. The letter, we later learn, confirms what many longtime viewers have suspected since season 3. Thabo is not the biological son of Baba Elias Makona, the man who built the company and raised him as his own. The rest of the first act deals with the emotional shockwaves of this discovery rippling outward. Gogo Nomsa, Elias's widow and Thabo's mother, is confronted by Thabo in one of the episode's most devastating scenes. He doesn't shout. He doesn't accuse her of anything cruel. He simply asks, quietly, "Why didn't you tell me?" And Gogo Nomsa, for the first time in the show's history, doesn't have a ready answer. She looks smaller than we've ever seen her. She admits that she made a promise to Elias before he died, a promise never to reveal the truth, because Elias raised Thabo as his firstborn son in every way that mattered, and telling him the truth felt like erasing every sacrifice Elias ever made for him. It's a heartbreaking justification, because we understand her reasoning even as we understand why Thabo feels betrayed. This is where the writing in episode 49 really shines. Nobody in this scene is a villain. Everybody is simply a person trying to survive an impossible situation, and the show trusts its audience to sit with that discomfort instead of handing us an easy answer. While the Makona household is unraveling emotionally, the business plotline keeps pace right alongside it. We cut to the Makona Freight Solutions boardroom, where a delegation from a construction conglomerate called Boardroom Holdings has arrived to discuss a major new contract, one that could double the company's annual revenue if it goes through. On paper, this should be a triumphant scene. Instead, it's dripping with tension. Zenil, still reeling from her conversation with Advocate Dlamini, keeps second-guessing every decision Thabo makes in the meeting, publicly questioning contract terms in front of the Boardroom Holdings representatives in a way that visibly embarrasses him. It's clear she's not really upset about the contract terms, she's testing whether Thabo still has the authority and the confidence to lead the company at all, now that his position as firstborn son is suddenly in question. The Boardroom Holdings representative, a calm and calculating businesswoman named Ms. Radebe, notices the tension immediately. In a brilliantly uncomfortable moment, she pauses the meeting and asks, quite directly, is there a leadership issue I should be aware of before we sign anything? Nobody answers her right away, and the silence says more than any explanation could. This single line does an enormous amount of work in the episode. It externalizes the family's private crisis, turning it into something that now threatens their livelihood, not just their relationships. Business and blood have officially become tangled together, and there's no way to untangle them without someone getting hurt. After the meeting collapses without a signed deal, we get one of the episode's quieter, more reflective scenes. Thabo sits alone in his father's old office, a room the family has kept almost untouched since Elias passed away 2 seasons ago, surrounded by old photographs and a dusty logbook from the company's very first delivery route. He picks up a photo of himself as a boy, sitting on Elias's shoulders outside their very first depot. It's a simple image, but it carries enormous emotional weight, because the show is asking us the same question it's asking Thabo. Does this photograph mean less now that we know Elias wasn't his biological father? The episode doesn't rush to answer that question. It lets it breathe. This is where Zenil finally comes to find him, and their conversation becomes the emotional backbone of the second act. She admits that she already suspected the truth for years. She overheard a conversation between their parents when she was a teenager but never had the courage to bring it up. She apologizes, not for the truth itself, but for staying silent about it while quietly using the shareholder clause to challenge his position at the company. It's a genuinely moving scene, because we watch 2 adult siblings try to separate decades of love and shared history from a single piece of paper that threatens to redefine their entire relationship. Thabo asks her outright, "Do you think I don't deserve to run this company because of a DNA test?" Zenil hesitates, and that hesitation is the moment the episode wants us to remember. She doesn't say no immediately. And that pause, more than any DNA result, is what truly wounds him. Meanwhile, a smaller but equally important subplot develops around Linda and her sister-in-law, Precious, who runs the company's logistics planning department. Precious has been quietly advocating for the company to modernize its fleet tracking systems for over a year, but her proposals keep getting shelved because of more urgent matters, a phrase that, by this point in the season, really means family politics keep taking priority over business growth. In episode 49, Precious finally loses her patience. In a tense scene with Linda, she says she's tired of watching a good company get held hostage by family drama, and she hints that she's been approached by a rival logistics firm about a job offer. This subplot might seem smaller compared to the DNA revelation, but it's important because it shows the practical, real-world cost of the family's unresolved conflict. Talented people are starting to walk away, and the company's future is at risk not just from legal disputes, but from losing the very people who keep it running day to day. As the episode moves into its back half, we get a rare, warmer scene between Bab Vusi and young Saifo, Thabo's teenage son, who has clearly picked up on the tension in the house even though nobody has explained anything to him directly. Bab Vusi takes Saifo fishing at the river, and in a gentle, almost old-fashioned conversation, he tells him something that ends up being one of the thematic keys to the entire episode, that a family is not built only from blood, but from the choices people make to show up for each other, year after year, even when it's difficult. It's a quiet scene, deliberately placed as a contrast to all the shouting and legal maneuvering happening elsewhere in the story, and it gives the audience a moment to breathe before the emotional intensity ramps back up. That breathing room doesn't last long. Back at the house, Thabo confronts Gogo Nomsa a second time, and this time the conversation turns sharper. He wants to know who his biological father actually is. Gogo Nomsa initially refuses to answer, insisting that it doesn't matter, that Elias was his father in every way that counted. But Thabo pushes harder than we've ever seen him push before, telling her that it's not her decision to make anymore, that she took away his right to know the truth once, and she doesn't get to take it away a second time. Eventually, worn down and clearly in pain herself, Gogo Nomsa reveals a name, a man named Becky Zulu, someone Elias apparently knew and worked with decades ago, before the two men had a falling out that was never fully explained. This revelation lands like a bombshell, not just because of the name itself, but because Zulu happens to be the surname of a rival transport company that has been quietly trying to undercut Mekona Freight Solutions contracts for the past several episodes. Suddenly, the personal and the professional collide in a way the show has clearly been building toward for a while, and it reframes almost everything we thought we understood about the business rivalry driving this season. The final act of episode 49 is where all these threads start to pull tight. Zanil, now aware of the Becky Zulu connection, begins to suspect that this whole situation might not be a coincidence, that someone may have deliberately arranged for that DNA information to surface now, at the exact moment the company is negotiating one of the biggest contracts in its history. She doesn't say this out loud yet, but the way the camera lingers on her face as she puts the pieces together tells us this suspicion is going to drive her actions in the episodes ahead. It's a clever piece of plotting, because it takes what could have been a simple family melodrama and turns it into something with real stakes. If someone did leak this information strategically, then the DNA revelation isn't just a personal tragedy, it's a calculated business attack, and that changes everything about how the family needs to respond. Thabo, for his part, spends the episode's final scenes wrestling with a decision that the show frames as the true emotional climax, whether to step back from leading Mekona Freight Solutions, at least temporarily, while the family sorts through the fallout, or to dig in and fight for the position he has spent his entire adult life preparing for. In a quietly powerful monologue delivered to Lindybe in their bedroom late at night, he admits that part of him is terrified that if he steps back even for a moment, people will start to see him differently forever, not as Elias Mekona's son, but as an outsider who was simply allowed to run the family business by accident. Lindybe, in one of her strongest scenes of the season, reminds him that everything he has built, every contract he's closed, every driver he's trained, every late night he's spent keeping the company afloat, was earned through his own effort, not inherited by blood, and that no piece of paper from a clinic can undo that. The episode's final scene brings the family back together in the same kitchen where it all began, but the atmosphere is completely different now. Nobody is pretending anymore. Gogo Nomsa, visibly exhausted from the day's revelations, tells the family that she is done carrying secrets, and that whatever comes next, they need to face it together, honestly, even if it's painful. Thabo doesn't fully forgive her in this scene. The show is smart enough to know that kind of wound doesn't heal in a single conversation, but he does sit back down at the table with her, which feels like its own small, significant act of reconciliation. Zanil, meanwhile, receives a phone call just as the family is settling into this fragile peace, and her expression shifts instantly from relief to alarm. The episode ends on her stepping outside to take the call in private, leaving the audience with the unmistakable sense that whatever she's about to hear is going to blow this fragile peace apart all over again. So what does all of this actually mean for where the story goes from here? A few things stand out. First, the Becky Zulu connection is clearly going to become a much bigger part of the season than the DNA reveal alone. The show has spent 49 episodes building a rivalry between Makona Freight Solutions and the Zulu family's transport business, and tying that rivalry directly into Thobo's biological parentage suggests the writers are setting up a much larger confrontation, one that could eventually force Thobo to work with, or against, the very family that may be responsible for undermining his position. Second, Zenil's suspicion about strategic timing is likely to drive her arc for the next several episodes. If she's right that someone deliberately leaked the DNA information to destabilize the company right before the Boru Holdings deal, then her investigation into who did it could become one of the show's central mysteries heading into the back half of the season. Third, and perhaps most importantly, the emotional core of the show remains firmly intact. Whatever business intrigue unfolds, episode 49 makes it clear that the real story has always been about what defines a family, whether it's blood, or whether it's the everyday choice to stay, to show up, and to keep loving each other even when the truth is complicated. There's also the smaller but meaningful thread involving Precious and her potential departure from the company. If she does leave, it would mark a real turning point for Makona Freight Solutions, symbolizing that the fallout from this family crisis isn't contained to the Makonas themselves, it's already costing them talent, stability, and momentum in a competitive industry where they can't afford to fall behind. Watch for this thread to resurface soon, possibly as another pressure point pushing Thobo and Zenil to resolve their differences before they lose more than just a contract. Taken as a whole, Episode 49 is one of the strongest entries KwaBaba has delivered this season, precisely because it refuses to rush its emotional beats. The DNA revelation could easily have been played as a single shocking twist and nothing more, but the writers use it instead as a lens to examine every relationship in the Makona family, sibling loyalty, marital trust, inherited responsibility, and the quiet grief of a mother who thought she was protecting her son by keeping the truth from him. Nothing is resolved by the end of the hour, and that's exactly the point. Real families don't fix decades of hidden pain in a single conversation, and KwaBaba clearly understands that letting the wound stay open is far more powerful than rushing toward a tidy resolution. As we head into episode 50, the biggest open questions are these: what did Zenil just hear on that phone call, and how directly is it connected to the Zulu family? Will Thobo choose to step back from leadership, or will this crisis push him to prove himself more forcefully than ever? And perhaps most importantly, now that the truth is finally out in the open, can this family find a way to define themselves by the love they've built rather than the biology they never chose? Episode 49 doesn't answer any of that yet, but it makes one thing very clear: the ground beneath the Makona family has shifted permanently, and there is no going back to the way things were before that envelope arrived. That's our full breakdown of KwaBaba episode 49. Let us know in the comments who you think Zenil's mystery caller is, and whether you think Thobo should stay on as CEO or step aside while the family sorts through everything that's just come to light. We'll be back with our episode 50 breakdown as soon as it airs, so stay close, because if this episode was any indication, the Makona family's story is only just getting started.